Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss the role of Duncan Smith, possibly the thickest Conservative ever to lead his party and a bafflingly ill-informed Brexiteer who is going to be chairing a group advising Boris Johnson on regulatory reform. Words can barely describe just how dangerous this concept is, but I'll give it a go. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, as I've talked about in the past, if you look at the Brexit deal from the point of view of Conservative Brexiteers, what does it really give? It gives them the ability to say they got a deal with the EU. Few people will take the time to understand what's in the deal, so the government can claim it's a great deal and people will either believe them or not, depending on their political allegiances. It also allows the government to pick and choose which EU standards it would like to replicate, taking the economic hit by doing so, but allowing them to pursue their dream of a US trade deal and the complete privatisation of public services, including but not limited to the NHS in the UK, or whatever's left when they're done. And that's it. Everything else in the deal really is what the EU wanted. The EU required much more emphasis on goods for their trade with the UK than services, and the deal covers trade in goods. The UK depends much more for our trade with the EU on services than goods, and the deal doesn't really cover services. It's a crap deal, better than nothing, but a crap deal. But it opened the door for that regulatory reform, which is not necessarily an accurate term when you consider what Brexiteers have been calling regulatory reform. See, what that usually means is you want to change regulations. You may wish to tweak existing ones. You know, there were some that were perfectly good at one time, but in need of modernisation. Or you want to add new ones to take account of things that weren't really an issue 10 years ago. What the Conservatives seem to want to do is to remove them. That's what they call regulatory reform, actually just getting rid of a load of them. They don't like regulations because it regulates corruption. Regulations exist to ensure fair play in various aspects of society, including business. But they're paid for by those who acquire their wealth through privilege, not playing fair and being better than their competitors. So when Boris Johnson essentially wants to know is which regulations he can throw on the fire now. For this task, he seems to have appointed Duncan Smith, a former Conservative Party leader and prominent backbench Brexiteer and nose picker. Now, if you're going to have a thorough look at the regulatory framework of an entire country, you probably need people with, I don't know, high intelligence, who are well informed, have sound judgment, and can manage complex projects. Just so that you have confidence that Duncan Smith is such a person, in 2019, he publicly backed the withdrawal agreement as well as voting for it in Parliament. He even made a speech commending it and attacked anyone who would not support it. A bit over a half a year later, he attacked the same withdrawal agreement, saying he hadn't actually read it, so of course he didn't understand what it was all about. He then attacked anyone who wouldn't also attack it with him. Good. So, got the right chap for this complex job then. But to his task, and reports are suggesting that Duncan Smith said that he would not lead what he termed a slash and burn exercise. This is somewhat at odds with what Eurosceptics such as himself have spent the last few years calling for, but it seems that the government may be trying to move away from this position. Possibly as a result of the fact that Johnson agreed a deal with the EU that comes with severe consequences for pursuing such a policy. I'll be talking about that in another video this weekend. The business community has also been against massive deregulation. The way the Financial Times put it, business leaders want the government to become nimbler at making new rules. Now, to me, nimbler suggests changing regulation in a short period of time to take advantage of changing market conditions, which sounds all very nice from a business point of view, but I'm going to suggest that amongst the many things that we've learned from the pandemic is that when regulations are applied quickly, in haste, without proper scrutiny, a right arse is made of things. After all, MPs apply regulations. But MPs are not necessarily legal experts. And even those who are legal experts are not necessarily experts in the relevant area of law. And when that regulation is designed to assist in international trade, it becomes even trickier. This nimbler way of doing things could end up doing to business what the government did to our pandemic response. I get that parliamentary procedure can sometimes seem, slow-paced, but what you're essentially doing, try and bear this in mind, is you've got to get a bunch of people, hundreds of people, who don't need any qualifications to understand sometimes very complex proposals, and often have no qualifications, and to also understand how that proposal will impact on whole areas of life and business. Add into that there will be parties and lobbyists throwing their views around as well just to muddy the waters, and the capacity for error is enormous. But the article had some interesting points. It noted that Johnson has been asking business leaders to come up with ideas for reform. Interesting notion, I thought, for two reasons. One, it suggests that the Conservatives forged ahead with Brexit without actually knowing what they were going to do with it. I mean, wasn't the time to ask for business leaders to suggest what they would want before the Brexit campaign? Secondly, it's nice to know that the government might actually consult with some groups who will be affected by their policies. I mean, they didn't consult haulage groups about customs procedures. They didn't consult with teachers over school openings and closures or exams. They don't consult with doctors and nurses over vaccination policies or PPE acquisition. And they didn't consult with care homes over protecting the elderly. So yeah, good to know that they might consult some people who may know what they're talking about on some things at least. Not that consultations always do the trick, because the government did, after all, consult with scientific and medical experts on COVID-related matters. They just didn't pay any attention to their conclusions. But anyway, one business leader was quoted as saying, "We don't want a bonfire of regulations. If they want to cut red tape, they should start with the new burdens exporters are facing at the borders after Brexit." Now, if that's a commonly held view in the business community, and I rather think it will be, then I suspect this is going to be another situation where a year or two down the road, these consulted business leaders will be bemoaning the fact that the government didn't pay any heed to their advice at all. After all, how do you cut red tape on trade with the EU? I mean, we've just enforced a government policy to increase that red tape. The only way to reduce it is to align closer to the EU. It's really that simple. And yet the government don't seem keen at the moment on doing that. They may be forced into it in a few years' time, and I'm quite sure that when we have a government of whatever party where the people at the top aren't personally implicated in Brexit, that will absolutely happen, but it's certainly not in their plans right now. Another relevant quote, this time from a former Conservative cabinet minister, was, "You cast around and find virtually nothing anyone wants to repeal. Then you find there was a reason it was put there in the first place." And this has been part of my political consciousness since I was a kid, because it was such a common theme in Yes Minister. For those who are familiar with the show, it's a political comedy. Governments always come in promising to cut red tape. Conservative governments in particular. But the fact of the matter is that regulation is a ball ache to implement. You don't do it unless there's a need to. It's not exciting. It doesn't get you headlines. It doesn't win you the popular vote. You simply do not do it as a politician. It does you no good at all unless there's a bloody good reason. Now, sure, times change, and sometimes regulations are no longer fit for purpose and need modernising. Absolutely. But that's not what's been talked about here. What's been talked about is a lot of so-called wasteful red tape that needs binning. But there's no such thing. Apart from, of course, all the Brexit red tape that they've just given us. But in terms of UK red tape, but they'll want to do something because they need to make it look like, they talked about the need to cut red tape, as all governments do. They need to make it look like they've binned a load of red tape, which suggests that what we will actually see is a load of regulation thrown onto the bonfire, whether anyone wants it or not, at nobody's request, just for the hell of it, because the government don't fundamentally know what to do with Brexit now that they have it, and they've appointed a chair for a group who is to intelligent reasoning what Mr. Magoo is to sharpshooting. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.